Hello? Anybody? I'm still here! Trapped inside this whale gut! I can hear people out there! Hey, I'm in here! In the whale! You know, the world's largest mammal, lying here on the beach! You can't miss it! Well, where are you going?
What a predicament.
Hi, my name's Alex, and this is my podcast, What a Predicament, the only podcast recorded inside of a whale's stomach. I'm kind of like a 21st century Noah, except instead of God, I find the facts concerning some of the predicaments of the modern day. Now, I've not really had my finger on the pulse of what's been going on lately since I was swallowed by a whale last year, so I've had nothing but time to just stew on various predicaments. And the aim of this podcast is to give you a little bit more of a background on some of the stuff that's going on under our noses. And today, I'm going to do a little bit of a marketing case study. A story of how almost anything is for sale if the price is right. Take skateboarders, rebels, right? Punks. I'll grind your property and make loud noises going past your driveway while you're busy being inactive. Skaters have always had a no-outsiders attitude, inherited from surf culture. But what if the outsider was like, here's $50? How quickly would they stick to their guns then? Skateboarding's had surges of popularity, more ups and downs than the wall of your average quarter pipe. Big for a minute in the 80s before splatting down into the concrete, booming again in the late 90s, early 2000s, thanks to, amongst other things, the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater video games, inspiring a whole generation yet to learn that kickflips are actually way harder than hitting X left square. With widespread appeal came corporate interest. Tony Hawk made deals with corporations like McDonald's and T-Mobile, who saw the money in the skate market. When you go to Tony Hawk's Wikipedia page, one of the first things you'll see is, quote, in 2014, Hawk was named one of the most influential skateboarders of all time by Fox Weekly, which says a lot about the mainstreamization of skating. The International Olympic Committee gave skating a unanimous thumbs up for a spot in the 2020 Summer Games in Tokyo, guaranteeing even more spotlight on this once outsider activity. Understandably, the skaters that helped build the sport and shape the culture would be wary of men in suits coming along and trying to cash in on their literal blood, sweat and tears. So when Nike first tried to break into the skate market, they were ignored like so many no skateboarding signs. But today, not only are Nike SBs on the feet of half the kids at any given skate park, including the increasing infestation of scooter kids, but also members of the wider public can be caught rocking their Stefan Janoski Pro shoes. So how'd that happen? Was the price right, or was it a hostile takeover? Is it bad that some of the best skaters in the world now can make some real money, even if it is just a fraction of what a pro basketballer or footballer might make? Not to mention good jobs for other skate industry veterans like team managers, shoe designers, people who do ad layouts and so on. From a marketing point of view, how did a company manage to infiltrate an industry wildly opposed to their presence? They own the big name pros, they own the biggest competitions like Tampa, Battle at the Barracks and Street League. How did Nike buy skateboarding, especially when they've tried and failed before? Well, the third time round, the sneaker giant did its homework, scrapping focus groups in favour of skateboarding ethnographies written by anthropology graduate students, spending 2 years conducting guerrilla market research, hiring anthropology PhD candidates to infiltrate the skateboarding subculture by surveilling young boys at the skate park. They knew what they wore, what their habits were, what their attitudes were. They started to learn the lingo. They noticed how many skate shoes took influence from their own dunk basketball shoes, so they made a skate-friendly line of that for their first release under the Nike SB banner, endorsed by an eclectic group of cool pro skaters, not necessarily the biggest names, but like the ones with street cred. They'd release more shoes, some hit videos, and sign more riders to their roster, this time starting to grab some of the big names with more mainstream appeal, while allowing their original team to slowly drop off the team page of their website. But as Nike spokespeople have maintained, you can't win over skaters with marketing alone. It takes good products, which, with decades of sports shoe technology to go with their buying clout and their factories, they could pump out as quickly as skaters could ollie through them. Nike execs can deservedly pat themselves on the back, but there is still a rebel alliance to Nike Incorporated's empire. Steve Birdo Geisinger and his partner Leticia Ruano helm the Santa Cruz-based Consolidated Skateboards, a 25-year-old board company with a roster of ripping riders and a dark sense of humour running through their products. Recently, I bought a hoodie of theirs with a graphic of a rabbit that has its own paw cut off, and it's offering it to another rabbit saying, "For good luck." In the 90s, they launched the Don't Do It Foundation, a public awareness campaign aimed at encouraging skateboarders to take back skateboarding. I got them on the phone to talk about the origins of their opposition.
It was around 97, and Nike had come in and was sponsoring some guys, and
they were throwing out those ads, the what if.
Yeah, they were throwing out these commercials. What if all athletes were treated like skateboarders? And they had tennis courts with a chain across it, so people couldn't play tennis. And they had these clever commercials, and people were like, "Oh, I like these commercials." And and to be honest, like I liked them too, but I knew like this was some ad agency developing a strategy of how is Nike going to infiltrate this market. Because these guys weren't skateboarders, right? So they do market research, and so.
And skateboarding at the time was fickle. We were very protective of skateboarding.
Yeah, we were protective of skateboarding, and also
as an industry.
For us, it felt like we're going backwards, right? So here's Steve Rocco branching off and taking skateboarding back, and here was New Deal, and these companies are starting up that are skater owned, and I'm like, well, we're not going to go backwards here. We're not going to get this corporation that has immense distribution worldwide, can serve everybody with their existing distribution, which doesn't include skate shops. We just felt like, man, if we legitimize these guys, they could just swoop up the whole thing. And if you look at the traditional sports, there's no football player-owned companies, basketball player-owned companies, soccer player-owned companies. There isn't any of that, and there's a reason for it. And so we're like, hey, we don't want skateboarding to go that route. So back then in 97, there was no email and there was no internet.
Social media.
Yeah, social media. So, we had to write letters and send them out to all the shops.
And we were doing ads in magazines, in Thrasher and Transworld, and our first Don't Do It ad pretty much explained it all.
Yes. So we had a different means of like trying to get the message out there. So we sent letters to shops and basically said, hey, you're slitting your own throat by legitimizing these guys, because the only reason they need you is to gain legitimization. And then once they've got that, they don't need you.
Because you said this was their first go was 97. They've had a couple of attempts, I've heard, trying to get into the industry before. Now it's obviously a lot more prevalent. What happened the first couple of times where it didn't work out? Obviously the skaters were a bit more in solidarity.
Yeah, for sure. So I think back then we circulated the information. People got it. The shops conveyed like, oh yeah, we don't want that. That's not cool. Those are jocks. Jocks have hated skateboarders forever. And, it was more of a no-brainer. And then, then they tried to come in again. So I think they felt like, well, we can't come in as Nike because people associate that with other sports. And so they tried to start Xavier, and it was owned by Nike, but they tried to make it look like it was this small
independent brand.
Yeah, independent brand. And so we ran ads saying Nike owns Xavier, so that they couldn't hide behind that. And so then that kind of failed. And then their last attempt, I think they were really smart, and they knew we have to take care of the key positions in skateboarding. So the magazines, the core shops, the top riders. So So they must have had a really large entry budget, and they basically...
Yeah, they threw tons of money at the writers, the mags, building parks, contests, like sponsoring the contest, offering shops, the sneakerhead collection, just really making it really enticing to everyone in skateboarding to hop on board.
So what do you think made it work for them, their strategy this time round, in terms of, was it the attitudes of skateboarders in the mid-2000s had a different kind of mindset that were more open to it, or it was just a very calculated marketing strategy?
I think it was very calculated marketing strategy. So they flew all the top key core retailers to their place in Oregon, and they said, "Hey, look, we've got these collectible shoes, and there's these people that will line up for them. And what we'll do is we'll brand them Nike SB, and we'll make them available only through, these core skate shops. And we'll sell them to you for $40, but you're going to be able to mark them up and sell them for $300 or more, and people will line up for them." So the shops at this time, and it happened to be in kind of a downturned economy, so they're like, "Wow, this sounds like this could be good." And at the same time, they're getting in bed with Thrasher and the magazines and saying, "Oh, hey, we want to do an article. We'll fly the Thrasher staff first class to Europe, put everybody up in 5-star hotels." And this is something that the skateboard industry hadn't seen. This was so new. And so these guys just were like, "Wow, no other shoe company's doing this for us." And I think they swallowed the bait. They didn't see long-term how it could be detrimental.
They didn't see Nike's motive. It wasn't from the heart. It was a strategy. It was a business strategy.
Because to sort of almost play devil's advocate, on the one hand, you could say, "Hey, it's great. They're giving an opportunity for skate shops to make money." As far as options go, I wouldn't complain about having a pair of Nike shoes on the shelf alongside, S or other traditional skateboarding brands, shoe companies. There's nothing wrong with having different options. More choice is awesome. It's freedom of choice. But it doesn't really seem like there are more options. I think since they've penetrated the market, there seems to be less and less shoe companies on the shelves and more Nikes. Do you think that's a coincidence?
Not at all. Not at all. I talk to shops all the time who tell me about the minimums they need to meet. So you have, on the one hand, the Nike sales reps pressuring them to buy all this stuff, even stuff that isn't going to sell. And then the next month you have the accounting department pressuring them for payment. And it's no wonder that shops say they're going out of business because of Nike. So in the end, all of skateboarding loses because Nike is pressuring to take more and more wall space, causing skate shoe companies to have less space on the wall, so they lose out on sales, so they can't compete as much. And then pretty soon, these smaller shops can't keep up with these crazy minimums that Nike is making them do, so they end up going out of business. So all of skateboarding ends up losing out. And in reality, I think that's long-term. That's Nike's long-term goal. They don't care about the core shop. They just wanted to get in, so then they could put their shoes in Foot Locker and Journeys and everywhere else. It's just the skateboarding doesn't belong.
And why, to sort of explain to people who, from outside of skateboarding, who don't know much other than hearing people make loud noise when they roll past their driveway or whatever, why would it be important to keep skateboarding in the hands of skateboarders? You'd sort of mentioned about how other sports, there is no football-owned football companies. Why is it so important to sort of keep this little thing to ourselves?
Well, and I think it's born from passion, right? And skateboarders are passionate about what they do, and I think it's like anything else. Say farming or your foods. You don't want a chemical company being in charge of your food supply. You'd rather have these organic farmers that are passionate about growing healthy, great food. Like, that's who you want making your food, you know. And so I think with anything, you want the people who are passionate
to be the number one priority. Yes, you need money to keep going, but you need the passion first because, you know, for instance, you know, the company Bauer, the hockey company, Nike came in and bought Bauer because hockey was on an upswing. They were growing as an industry. Nike comes in and buys Bauer, and then all of a sudden Nike or Hikey takes a dive, and they're unloading Bauer. But in the meantime, while they had Bauer, they're taking out all the companies that grew that industry to where it was, just like we did in skateboarding as a skateboard community. We grew it to this industry. We had no help from these outsiders. Like, it would have been different if companies like Nike and Adidas had been here from the beginning and helped it grow, even though there was no money. But they weren't. They waited until there was money, and then they came in.
Is that because I've heard people make the argument, oh, if you don't like Nike, why wouldn't you like Vans? Because they're a corporation or whatever. But would the difference be that Vans was there since 1966? Or?
At the very least, okay, yes, they got bought out and everything, and we're just kind of coming from the point of, let's just get the blatant outsiders out first. You know, at least Vans, they came from skateboarding. They've stuck to skateboarding. They didn't venture out into tennis and golf and basketball. It's like they came from skateboarding.
And to be honest, too, you know, Nike actually has a great story about where they came from with Bill Bowerman, and he was Phil Knight's track coach, and he used to take the runners' shoes apart and try to make the shoes better, and use his wife's waffle maker to try to make these better soles, and then they were selling shoes out of the back of their car, and it's, you know, to some extent it's like, wow, you know, that's an awesome story, but it's from the track, and that was your passion, was running, and so that's where your niche should stay, you know. Then they just turned into this huge money-making machine. Bill Bowerman was disgusted about the direction that the company went, and he ended up leaving. But you know, it's like the same thing for skateboarding. It's like skateboarders are passionate about what they do. They look into it with the things they make, and they're into it. And it's different. And I think those are the people that you want in charge of it.
And I think it's great that people are looking into, well, what about these other corporate outside brands? And it's great. It's opening up people's eyes. So, you know what? So when you go to make a purchase, like, you're doing your research, and you're going to support who you want to support. Like, it's not blind marketing, which is, Nike is a marketing agency, you know, and so to educate these kids on truth versus marketing is awesome, because when they're going to make the purchase, and because obviously at the end of the day, their vote, their dollar is going to determine who wins.
Yeah, it's their
if they go in there educated and they know where their money is going to, then that's who they support. Well, good for them, because they are making a decision based on their own education.
It's that age-old saying, let every dollar you spend be a vote to the kind of world you want to live in. I always thought that was really something worth keeping in mind.
Yeah.
Well, and it's true.
And does it ever feel, when you're at the skate park and there's a bunch of kids with Nikes on their feet, does it ever feel like a losing battle going up against something where their pockets are so deep that how could you ever turn the tide?
It was depressing for a while. It was really sad, you know. We in particularly felt outcast because we were the only company going head to head with them, and at the time everyone had been bought out, you know, and people wanted to get on that gravy train, and so it was depressing because it was like, for us, skateboarding as a whole was so much bigger than one company, you know, helping a handful of skaters. And so it was tough, but you know what? We made a decision when we went up against them this last time, knowing full well that they had bought everyone out. And we looked at it and we said, okay, there's a strong possibility that we are going to go out of business. But we're okay with that because we see where this industry is going and we want to have nothing to do with it. And so for us, it was just like, it is what it is. We're going to do our thing and let's just see where it goes.
Do you see the tide turning at all? I've noticed just whenever, say on Instagram, there's a skater who's announced maybe they've moved on from their current shoe sponsor, and just scrolling through the comments, there's, no matter who it is, there's always like, please don't go to Nike, please don't do this, or if they do, then there's a lot of backlash. So there's definitely something, it's in the air. There's and I think you guys are definitely very responsible for that. Do you feel that there's a little bit of an upswing?
Definitely. I mean, like you said, we've been in the trenches for a long time, just watching it happen. And I would say in the last year to 2 years, like we've started, okay, it flatlined, and now it's leaning towards skater-owned again, and it's just so refreshing to see. It's just, and you know, throughout those, you know, dark years for us, you know, we would get beat down. You know, we would just be like, God, this is so sad. Like, because to us, it was so obvious. You know, the message was simple: keep skateboarding in the hands of skateboarders, and so it was really sad. So now it's just so refreshing to see that you know, people are getting back in and they're caring. And, you know, you see comments from Andrew Reynolds and Mike Carroll and even Jamie Thomas, like, calling out the sporting goods company, saying, yeah, because of them, you know, Fallen is gone. And the people, the kids and skaters who these are their idols, they're saying that is huge. It's huge. And so that's what, you know, I would talk to heads of shoe companies, and I would just be mind boggled, you know, going, God, would you rather die a slow, painful death, or do you want to go down fighting? You're going to die anyways. Which one are you going to choose? Like, it's a no brainer to us. I don't know. I don't know if we were missing something or what, but you know, these guys were bleeding and they were going to, you know, die. And I'm like, get up, say something, you know, get your writers that support you and love you and want to keep seeing you in business, and to say stuff in interviews or talk to the kids at the park or, you know, do an ad. Like, that speaks volumes. It's huge. And I mean, you know how much money that takes? $0. And to us, we were just like, this fight is so easy if companies would just step up. And it's just like, always amazed at how, you know, we were the only ones speaking up. It was mind-boggling.
What sort of resistance have you faced over the years? Has the company ever come after you specifically, try to quell you down, or other people trying to maybe suppress the message?
We felt it for sure.
Yeah, I've heard of shops. We're told if by Nike reps, if they wanted the Nike account, they couldn't carry Consolidated. I have my own cousin who lives down in San Luis Obispo, a town in Central California. I went to a shop and she asked why they weren't carrying Consolidated, and they're like, "Oh, Consolidated is a cool company, but Nike told us, you know, we can't carry them if we want their account." You know, so my cousin called me freaking out, and I was like, "Yeah, I know." And we also have this surf photographer when they were in surfing. Nike is in surfing. He's a big time photographer, and he was out shooting photos with all these riders that had "Don't Do It" stickers on their boards, and he was shooting these insane surf shots, and they weren't getting in the mags. And so he finally went to the editors and was like, "What's up? Why aren't these photos getting in the mags?" And they straight up told him, Nike told us if they see any "Don't Do It" stickers or anything related to "Don't Do It" in the mags, they're going to pull their advertising. Jeez. And so he was like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, from
and then we had a zine, actually. A friend of ours that had a magazine, and we advertised in it, religiously. And we had sent them an ad, and the editor called us one day and said, "Hey, I know you've been dealing with Jonathan, another guy from the mag." And he says, "But we have Nike wants to run this 2-page spread in our ad, in our magazine, and we can really use the money. But their only stipulation was there can't be a consolidated 'Don't Do It' ad in there. So you guys have to change your ad this month or take it out." And it was like, wow, at every avenue they were really trying to suppress our message. Even we went to the U.S. Open of surfing, and we had rented a plane to fly over with a "Don't Do It" banner. and so, because there's just a million people at this beach down in Southern California, and so sure enough,
and the "Don't Do It" campaign embraced. It wasn't just skateboarding; it embraced surfing and snowboarding as well, and that's why we were there, because that was.
Yeah, we wanted to keep.
The "Don't Do It" campaign is separate from Consolidated Skateboards, so we just, that was part of it. So that's why we were at the U.S.
Yeah,
Open.
we were at the U.S. Open because the message we wanted: surfing, skating, snowboarding. Right? To us, they're kind of intertwined. Yeah, they all kind of came from the same thing, and we're like, hey, they should be passionate people running these. So we're at the U.S. Open, and then here comes our plane, and we just are like, oh my God, so amazing. Mm-hmm. Well, what had happened was Nike also had a blimp up in the air to shoot aerial photographs. So our plane flew by once. We had a friend that was in Spain that's like, "Oh my God, I just saw it on the webcast." Like, we were so elated, and then it went back by, and we're waiting for it to come back around, and it never came back.
And we had told them, it's a live stream, right? So it's not like you can just be like, "Oh, we'll bring it in later," or it's a set time.
Yeah, it was the finals, and it was supposed to fly for 3 hours or something, or 4 hours during the finals. And so it went by once, and then it disappeared, and we're like, what the fuck? So Letitia's on the phone trying to call the guy. He's not answering. Finally, when the event is over, the guy answers and says, I don't know what happened. Let me get a hold of him. And so finally, when the event's over, they said that the airplane had some mechanical problem, and when we found out what the mechanical problem was, I called my buddy who's a pilot. He's like, "That's total bullshit." He's like, "There's 2 of those parts on the plane for exactly that reason," and so he says they're blowing fucking smoke up your ass. And so we were so mad, and so and they didn't care. The event was over. That's all. I mean, I'm sure they got some phone call that said, "Hey, land that thing. We'll pay you twice as much as they're paying you. Just get that thing out of the air." So they took it as, they were like, "It's coincidence. Sorry, there's something in the contract that says for any reason, if it needs to be down, because I came back and I put a stop payment on the credit card, and I was like, I'm not paying you."
Yeah.
And so it went back and forth for a while, and I was dealing with a broker at the time who had contracted this plane company. And so that's who I was calling the whole time. And he's like, "What do you mean it's not there?" He's like, "Oh, they probably just went to go get gas." And I was like, "Okay." So then another half hour passed. I was like, "They're still not here. They're still not here." And I'm freaking out, because I'm seeing the clock tick, and I just kept calling them, and at the very end, I said, "They never showed up again." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" So then when I put a stop payment on it, he's like, "You can't do that," and He goes, how about this? He goes, I'll give you another time to run the banner. And at the time I was furious. I was like, what other time is there going to be? I said, this is once in a lifetime, what, we're going to wait a whole another year, and so then I said, oh, the X Games are coming up in 6 or 8 months. And I said, run it then, because that was another live web feed. And he says, okay. And I was calling him, like, to the point where he was, like, annoyed, because I kept saying, okay, do you have it? Okay, you're set on the schedule. You got the plane. This is the date. This is the window. It has to be within this window.
And it was the street finals. The X Games skateboarding street finals is when we wanted it to fly.
And so it was like supposed to run from 1 to 3. And I even told him, I said, I want to go to the airport. I want to see that plane take off. And he was like, you can't go there. You can't go there. And I was like, I didn't understand why, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on faith that you are telling me, don't worry. Okay, so that day comes, and we go down to LA, and, we're just handing out Don't Do It stickers and stuff, and just waiting for the plane to come. 1 o'clock hits. We're like, okay, well, we don't see it. 1:10, 1:15. And I call the broker. He's like, what do you mean it's not there? I'm like, it's not here. And again, the same thing starts over again. So the next 2 hours, I'm freaking out on the phone. The contest ended at 3 o'clock on the dot. At 3:05, we see the plane coming.
Yeah, after people are clearing out of the stand,
they're gone.
And the finals are over.
The heat is done.
Yeah.
And it was just like, okay, once, maybe, but twice. And I find out they used the same plane company. So the plane company called Nike again and said, hey, this is happening again. How much are you willing to pay?
It's like mafioso shit.
Seriously, it's crazy how mafioso like things. I mean, it's great. There's some eerie things that have happened that were like, this is weird.
But on the other side of that too is, I think they know, just like we know, how powerful this message is, and it's important for them to suppress it because it's that powerful.
And the thing is that not many people know this story because the mags, like the major mags, like Thrasher and Transworld and the skateboard mags, they refuse. Like this, I would say this is one of the most, if not the most, heated topics in skateboarding, whatever side you're on, right? And every time this comes up, people from both sides get into it big time. And it's like, it always is. Another mind boggler is, why aren't, magazines are supposed to be unbiased, right? Why aren't they doing interviews from both ends of the spectrum? Like we've told them, do an interview Nike, interview us, and people can decide what side they want to choose. And at least they can hear arguments from both sides. And they refuse to touch it, and they definitely refuse to touch us, which is like, for us, we're like, that's so weird, because here we are heading this movement, and I feel that, we're pretty educated in all sides of the spectrum, but yet they refuse to touch us. And so it just makes me wonder if they have something if Nike has something over their heads, like, again, saying, if you go to them, we're going to stop advertising, just like they did to the surf mags, because it's really weird how they refuse to touch us. We're ready to do interviews anytime, any place.
What would you ask people to do to fight the good fight? What can an average skateboarder or a consumer do? I guess just be aware where they're spending their money and where their dollars are going.
I would say do your research and focus on supporting skater-owned and support your local skate shop.
Yeah, and it's that simple. Support skater-owned companies and support your local skate shop, and it would change. Everything would change. Skateboarding would get back into skateboarders' hands.
And if you're a company, fight. let the truth come out. Like, let marketing, there's marketing and there's truth. Let the truth come out, and skateboarders can then decide what they want to support.
Don't do it.
Take skateboarding back.
In full disclosure, I have bought Nikes before, as well as the Nike-owned Converse line of skate shoes. I watched their videos. One of my favourite pairs of shoes I ever skated was a pair of Lance Mountain Nike Blazers. So I'm no activist, but I also like that traditional skateboarding culture. It was a home for misfits who didn't want to play a team sport, and I feel that that's changing. And change is inevitable, I guess. It's not the end of the world, but it could be the end of an era. Though, as Steve and Letitia said, all that could change tomorrow, depending on where you spend your money. Which goes for more than just skate shoes. Money talks, whether you're trying to penetrate a new market or keep true to your personal values. What a predicament. Thanks to Birdo and Letitia from Don't Do It. You can read more about their campaign and chat to them at the Don't Do It Foundation Facebook page. Music in this episode comes from Graveless, more from them at graveless.bandcamp.com, and the song you're listening to right now is by the talented Cy Hart, a hip jazz cat out of Christchurch, New Zealand, who's so jazz he doesn't even have a Facebook page, man. Like a rare bird, you just have to be lucky enough to see him in person. He's actually a really good skateboarder himself. If you see him, get him to show you his kicky front board. If you liked this episode and want to hear another story about an underground subculture being brought kicking and screaming into the mainstream, you might want to check out episode 8 of What a Predicament, entitled Tattoo Brute, looking at how tattoos became a thing you could get while working a white-collar job. For that and every episode of What a Predicament, subscribe via iTunes or wherever you regularly find your podcasts, or follow the Facebook page, facebook.com/whatapredicament. What a Predicament is a Whatacat production, on Twitter at WhataCatProd and Instagram at WhataCatProductions. I'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback or predicaments you'd like me to look into in a future podcast. What's that? Someone's coming! Oh, I'm saved!
Alright, you'll want to lay the dynamite down there, there, and there.
What should I set the timer to?
Oh, say 2 weeks should do it.
Oh no! They're gonna do to me what they did to that beached whale in Oregon in the 70s. The one they thought they could blow up with explosives into more manageable chunks. Well, those chunks flew up to 1/4 of a kilometre away, crushing cars, and I'm next. In 2 weeks' time. What a predicament!
What are you doing? Are you going poo?
No, I'm going bananas.
Hey, special bonus for everyone who stayed till the end. Birdo and Letitia were awesome enough to hook Whatacat Productions up with some consolidated and Don't Do It swag to give away to listeners who like what they heard. So if you want a sick shirt or some stickers to show some solidarity, just jump onto facebook.com/whatapredicament, comment your t-shirt size under this episode, and I'll pluck a couple of people out at random who wear the sizes that I happen to have and send those out your way. Thanks again to the good folks at Consolidated Skateboards for that one.